Okay, good afternoon. Let's get started. I'm going to give you a brief update on larger scale initiatives that are going on in the lab, which could be of use to you as you are preparing early career presentations, proposals that you're going to be putting together, and then quickly we'll hopefully get a transition to our panelists who will be telling you their experiences going through this program. Some people who were successful in the last 2 years in getting funded. I hope that many of you will remember that we have a group of scientific initiatives that are lab-wide ones that include the Carbon Cycle 2 initiative, the Next Generation Light Source, the integration of biology and our effort to establish a second campus for biosciences. And at this point, we're adding newly, as a significant lab-wide effort, some planned and future activities in scientific computation, which I'll be telling you a little bit about. And of course, I hope you remember that on the operational side, community relations and safe and efficient lab are two really key things for our laboratory to prosper in the future. And it's important that you get engaged on those things as the leading edge of the future of the laboratory, okay? So let me first say that the way in which our lab strategy is built up is by trying the best we can to have a group of people, and you're all invited to throw your 2 cents in at any time by different mechanisms, but at any given time what we're trying very hard to do is to project what are going to be the big science drivers 10 and 15 and 20 years out. And so here are some things that I think we see as being incredibly important. Societal needs for technical solutions to energy and environment problems will only intensify and be greater, is our thesis. To 10, 15 years from now, those topics will only become far more intensive than they are already today. And as is always the case, but will continue to be true, new measurement tools can open new realms of inquiry, and one of the things a national lab should always be trying to do is to establish large-scale facilities that can create tools that change the way science is done. So it's important for us always to have in our portfolio some thinking along those lines. 2 other areas to specifically call out. We believe that the biology revolution will both deepen and broaden and have impact in many other disciplines, and especially in the spaces of energy and environment, it's going to turn out to be extremely impactful. So it's critical that our strategy encompass that possibility. And for sure, there's been a trend, but it's accelerating, where the importance of computation will become really more and more, while at the same time we face this situation in a number of fields now. It's been going on for some time in high-energy physics, it's true in genomics, it's true in many other areas right now, that the amount of data that we can collect in actually a very short period of time is absolutely overwhelming. So our ability to handle massive data sets is going to become also a very big feature of what science is going to look like 10 and 15 years from now. So those are 4 mega trends, and as we establish our lab strategy as a whole, those trends are in the back of our mind. So if you look at our strategy for energy and environment, of course, we've organized ourselves around this very large-scale effort of trying to provide an integrated view of what energy and environment research will look like 10 and 15 years down the road by bringing together the Carbon Cycle 2.0 initiative. And I encourage those of you who are in spaces that relate to this to become engaged in the CC2 initiative and also to become knowledgeable about it. The intent, of course, is to have, as I said, an integrated view where you might be participating in one of these circles, but in fact, how they all connect to each other via energy analysis and climate modeling is absolutely critical. In the 3 areas that I called out that are kind of pillars, in the measurement area, the next generation light source is going to be our big play. That's what we're trying to do in terms of new measurement tools. In biology, as you will see, much of our strategy at the moment focuses on establishing a single site where all the biologists can participate collectively in one physical location. So we're trying to solve an infrastructure problem that has a deep science motivation there. And in the computation space, you'll also see that we have a lot of new things planned. The Carbon Cycle 2 initiative continues to develop very nicely. There's lots of new things happening in that area. This past year we were successful along with Caltech, Caltech the lead institution, and the secondary hub in that case, to build the solar fuel hub in artificial photosynthesis. We also worked closely with Stanford and are part of the new photovoltaics manufacturing initiative, which is a new program that's going to be stood up this fall. The lab was also successful in bringing the Advanced Biofuels Process Development Unit, which takes our biofuels research into a new domain, from science to having deeper activity with commercial units that can come and do proof of concept and kind of pilot plant level types of activities. And of course, in the buildings efficiency space, we were successful in winning the bid for a user testbed facility, which is a facility where people can come and make modular buildings and try experiments in how buildings can be modified for efficiency. This coming year, it's very likely, even despite all the things that you hear in the newspaper, it's still very, very likely that there's going to be competitions for 2 energy and innovation hubs. One in energy storage, and in that area we've decided to partner with Argonne National Laboratory. They will be the lead institution, and Berkeley Lab will be participating as a very substantial partner in a proposal for an energy storage battery hub. Likewise, we're looking very carefully at the area of so-called critical materials. I just want to emphasize this started as a response to the crisis going on, if you read in the newspapers, with respect to rare earth materials, which are only mined in China and where there's been some instability with supply. It started in that space, but has become a much broader look at how our, what is the materials life cycle, how are materials created in general within the energy system. So there'll be a substantial effort on our part to plan an effort in the critical materials area, which will connect with issues of, say, chemistry of sustainability and issues of that type. So we see all those as being important areas. Now, coming back to these, that covers in a sense pretty quickly some big trends in CC2. With respect to measurement tools, as you hopefully know, we've been making the case for some years now to build a so-called next generation light source, which will consist of a superconducting accelerator that will be able to operate at high repetition rate to feed an array of X-ray lasers that are built off a set of undulators with different beamlines on the end. And so that's our goal. This past year we made substantial progress. We spearheaded a scientific proposal that ultimately went through some levels of review, and the DOE has made the so-called critical decision 0, stating that it has a mission need to build such a machine. That's a very important threshold for us to cross, and we're in the process now of trying to more deeply define what this machine would look like and what the science case in it would look like. There's a possibility that the project could start in a few years from now, 2-3 years from now. We're optimistic that that can happen. It's probably a 10-year project to build, but it's such a large-scale project. It's a well over $1 billion scale project, so it's probably the largest project that will ever have been built in Berkeley, and so it's very exciting for us to be engaged in that. Again, there, I encourage you, when you see opportunities, they'll pop up periodically in places like LBL Today and all those things. You should be looking at those. The science in that area is absolutely terrific. The light source itself will revolutionize the 3 basic ways in which X-rays are used. They can be used for imaging, they can be used for doing structure, and they can be used for doing spectroscopy. Each one of these, there's a whole story behind it that I can't go into now, but where we believe that the science is going to be quite exciting. So that's probably, it is undoubtedly the biggest project that the lab is engaged in. In terms of instrumentation, I want to emphasize that there's lots of other activities besides NGLS, and certainly in the high energy physics space, we have important activities in the 3 big frontiers: the energy frontier, the cosmic frontier, and the intensity frontier. In each one of those, we have a plan and an activity. Of course, in the energy frontier, our dominant activity is at the Large Hadron Collider via our work on the ATLAS detector and the team that is working around that. In the cosmic frontier, we are currently shepherding this proposal called Big Boss, which is a ground-based method for looking at issues of the expansion of the universe. And in intensity frontier, we still remain deeply engaged in this project, DOOZLE, which is a deep underground science and engineering lab that has had its ups and downs because recently NSF pulled out of it and things like that. But in the end, there are going to be some circumscribed project probably in the DOOZLE space that Berkeley Lab is going to play an important role in. So in each one of those places, we've got a role. And likewise, in nuclear science, certainly with the construction of the Greta detector, we have activities in a variety of areas, including the existing projects at RIC and the project that's turned on now at ALICE at the Large Hadron Collider, and the planned activities eventually at the Michigan State when the FRIB project is built. So in those areas, we do have big projects that we're engaged in, and I don't mean, by any means to downplay them, but in this area of measurement tools, the lab's biggest place certainly will be in the NGLS. I mentioned to you in biology that there's going to be this effort at integration, and what I want to state there is that when we look at the future of biology at Berkeley Lab, we see energy and environment issues as they intersect with biology as being a vast space that's going to open and become more and more important as the next 20 years unfold. And consequently, we're trying to organize ourselves really to be the lead institution in the world in that intersection between biology and energy and environment. And so we have some pretty ambitious plans for how to do that involve integrating these pieces together over the coming years. And at the core of it sits our plan for the second campus, because presently the pieces are all disparate. There's one piece in Walnut Creek with Joint Genome Institute, and one in Emeryville with the Joint Bioenergy Institute, and one in Berkeley, downtown in West Berkeley with the Life Sciences Division. So our efforts at Second Campus have been deeply integrated with the biology integration. And what I want to say there is just to let you know very quickly, because you may not be getting enough information on this, that we have focused on 6 sites that could potentially be sites that would house the Berkeley Lab Second Campus. And we've been in the midst for the last several weeks of holding a series of open houses and town halls in each one of these 6 communities where we've been hearing from people. And this started in Alameda, where there were 500 people that came out, and 50 of them spoke very engagingly about how excited they would be if Berkeley Lab were located in their community, which was a bit of a disorienting effect for us at first. And this shows a photograph of what happened 10 days later in Richmond, where there were almost 1,000 people, and they saw what happened in Alameda, so they had music and dancing and folk groups and all kinds of things like this going on, and it's been quite an interesting experience for us. So we're in the midst of that stuff, but I'm hoping that in the fall we'll make progress towards narrowing it down to a smaller number of sites, and we'll go from there. I mentioned a couple of times how important computation is. We see computation as being a really critical part of our future, so specifically a big push in energy efficient computing. Our lab is very strong in applied mathematics. We are putting together the early stages through LDRD, through seed monies, of a project which we're calling the Mathematical Foundry, which will of course leverage off of the success we've had next door with the Molecular Foundry, and we'll take some of those concepts to try to organize a different way in which our applied mathematicians will be able to be supported and ultimately to interact with a broad swath of community that have needs for applied mathematics. And of course, we continue to work in the deep problems that occur when you have computers like Hopper that have 150,000 and more processors. It gets very complicated to understand how to use those. So those are areas in which we'll continue to see a lot of growth. So that sort of brackets, if you like, overall the lab strategy in a very compact, quick period of time. So I don't want to take up all the time for this hour. Let me go now quickly to some aspects about this program that you're going to be applying to and just give you a quick feeling for it. First of all, this is a program which is now entering its 3rd year. It's a very exciting program. Many of us pushed for years for the DOE to have a program like this, and when they finally set it up, I can't tell you how happy we are because it really solves one of the biggest problems that national laboratories face, which is how to launch people on a successful career within the laboratory. So it is a program that's extremely competitive, as you'll see, but it does support outstanding scientists early in their careers. And the goal of the Department of Energy is partly to help early career people get their own footing, become able to do something on their own, but with the intent that that activity should integrate with the vision of the laboratory and of the department and of the division where you're doing your work, so that as you grow and become more successful, it's synergistic with all the other investments that are being made. That's the intent. In the first year, they made 22 awards at national labs and 47 at universities from a pool of 1,750 applicants. So you get a feeling for, this is super competitive. It's hard to get one of these, but it's certainly an important thing to do. And some of the recipients from the first year are going to be here on your panel momentarily. In the second year, again, there were 22 National Lab Awards, so hopefully there'll be 22 again next year. There were a little fewer a number of applicants, so your odds went up marginally there. We got 4. Only 3 people are listed here because the 4th was Trent Northern, who won the competition but also won the PCASE award. And there were 2 awards that were mutually exclusive, so ultimately he turned that one down and took the PCASE award instead. So we ended up with 4 nominally, but 3 in practice. In 2012, there's $10 million available for researchers at the DOE National Labs at about $500K per year. So it's of order 20 again. And the proposed research, again, as I've mentioned to you, really does have to fit within the scope of what Department of Energy is plausibly going to support. And it has to fit within the scope of programs at Berkeley Lab. So this is where your discussions with your, inside your organizations will help you figure out how to position yourself in these proposals in a successful way. Who is eligible to apply? People who are eligible to apply are research scientists, staff scientists, divisional fellows. Those are the categories of people who are able to apply. Project scientists and senior scientists are not able to, and you have to be within, what?
You just lost them.
I see. I mercifully didn't see that. You have to be within 10 years of receiving your PhD. So that's a requirement that they actually apply they'll check right away, boom, and that's okay. Pre-proposals are mandatory, so just know that. If you don't put in a pre-proposal and pass the first filter stage, you don't get to go to a full proposal. The project must be directed and executed by an individual investigator, no co-PIs, and in general what we've been told is really try to focus it on supporting the individual that's trying to do the research that's being proposed. You have to dedicate a minimum of 50% and up to 100% of the PI salary, and I think you can understand they don't want to see you having 10% of your time on the project, because then they'll feel like you're doing lots of other stuff and you're not really going to be doing what it is that you're proposing in a significant way. And then it says here, 1 proposal PI per competition, and you cannot submit, it looks like in the history of the program over many years, you can't compete more than 3 times. So it's like a 3 strikes and you're out type of deal, right? You can compete once, twice, 3 times. If you don't get it, they don't want to see you again, unfortunately. So that's a little rough. Labs must ensure that the pre-proposal research fit within the scope of science-funded programs at Berkeley Lab. And this is thing we've been repeating over and over in a sense. This is where you really need to talk with people inside your division, and depending on the structure inside your division, it may be different people you should talk to, so I don't want to completely bias that. You should know a little bit, hopefully, about how to handle that, or just talk to everybody and ask them who's the right person to really figure out what are the programs around here that I can make sure that I'm fitting in with. But I think I urge you to have several discussions with people along those lines, because that's really something that they do pay quite a bit of attention to. Other than that, what I can say is here are the relevant dates. You've got to get the pre-proposal in. That's the deadline, September 1, midnight. And October 3 is deadline for DOE to send you whether you make it to the next stage. And then November 29, midnight, is when full formal proposals are due. And evidently there is a website. I haven't tested it myself, but apparently there is one that includes the program announcement updates, and we'll have today's video. And these are some points of contact that's on that. You can go get that from the website. These are people who are points of contact in the different divisions, and they can probably give you a first pointer as to who you might talk to subsequently about any of these issues. So that's something that I can say. And here's some further email and website kind of information. Okay, so finally, this is the most important part here, which is we have people who have been successful in this project previously who are going to be your panel. We've got 5 people here. So the first one is Susanna Tring, if you could come on up. She's from the Genomics Division, and her proposal from 2011 is called Microbial Communities in Biological Carbon Sequestration. And then Jaime Zhang from Material Science and the National Center for Electron Microscopy, who had a proposal in 2011 called Real-Time TEM Imaging of Materials Transformations in Liquid and Gas Environments. Junchao Wu, who has been successful with a program in an effort, functional domain walls as active elements for energy technology. That was a UC Berkeley award. We did, I showed you the lab boards. We have in both years also had some faculty, often affiliated with the laboratory, who have been successful coming in from the Berkeley campus side. That's a different track, but nonetheless, we thought that Junchao, because he was in our community and successful, would be somebody to have here to talk with you. Christian Bauer, successful in 2010 from Physics Division, who had a proposal called Geneva, an NLO event generator for the Large Hadron Collider. And finally, Delia Miliron, who has inorganic nanocomposite electrodes for electrochemical energy storage and energy conservation. So the panel is here to talk with you, and I think a good way for us to start is just if each of you would just at the beginning just take one moment and say to the group here anything you can about your experience applying for it, just one quick thing about your overall impression. Just if you could just go down the line and do that real quick. Things might be like the hardest part for me was finding someone to talk to and therefore pay attention to this, or whatever, anything that comes to your mind as being something you would especially call out just to get it started, and then we'll open it for questions. You want to start?
Yes, I'm on the hook to start then. I'm Susanna Tringe. I work over at the Joint Genome Institute, and I think last year my advisor really encouraged me to apply for this as my very last year of eligibility, and I think that I felt a certain reluctance to put all this work in because I thought there was no chance, and he convinced me that it's really worth putting it together because even if you don't get it, then you have this proposal. You can keep working. You can keep working on it and improving it. And so it was really just a surprise to get it, and but it was certainly worth putting the time for.
My name is Jaime Zhang. I'm Material Science Division. Last year, this is the first year as a staff scientist, and I was pretty excited. People told me maybe you have to get several tries, but I really get excited. I thought it's a great time that put the ideas together. I put the effort in. I thought I get a lot of help, get a lot of suggestions from people, and including a lot of scientists here and UC Berkeley campus, talked with a lot of people. I thought it's a wonderful experience.
Okay. Okay. Still working? Okay. I'm Junchao Wu. I am an assistant professor in the material science department on campus. but I'm also a faculty staff scientist here in the material science division. Actually, this is my second try. I tried last year and I didn't get it. This year I was lucky and I got it. If there is one thing that I can share with you, I would say propose new things. Don't propose a linear extrapolation of what you have been doing in the past few years. Otherwise, it's going to be criticized, and it's not that interesting to DOE. Good luck.
I'm Christian Bauer. I'm in the physics division, and I applied in the first year. And my advice would probably be, I asked a lot of help of the senior people in the division. Can you read through this? What do you think? And it gets pretty annoying if they come back and say, can you just please rewrite the whole thing, and so on. But it's really important. And I was also actually, for the last year, I was on, for the Department of Energy on the selection committee of these awards. And I can really tell you that some people got essentially kicked out because they just didn't write the proposal well. So put time, make sure it's written well, and so on. That would be my advice.
So I'll echo what both Christian and Junchao said, in that I also found it important to reach outside of the topical areas I had a recent track record in, or really had any track record in putting together my proposal. And so I found a few very key people who were willing to hear my ideas and criticize them honestly, and do that iteratively. That really helped sharpen the focus of what I was going to propose.
Well, so just listening to that before we take on questions, one thing I do want to say is something that is kind of a theme in this, which is the time that you put into this, even if you're not successful, will not be wasted. If you have some ideas and you go around and talk to 5 or 6 people around the lab about them, already that discussion has advanced your integration with the laboratory and has helped you get the benefits of hearing how other people are thinking. So even if the proposal's not successful, it's played an important function for you in your career here anyway. So that sounds really good, and that sounds like a great thing for you to do. I know there have been some examples where people had proposals that sort of really crossed disciplines, and they used also the proposal as a vehicle to go and talk to people in other areas that they didn't know people in previously. And that's a great thing as well, to do that. There's lots of, if you can, many times you may find that the process of reaching out to some other distant part of the laboratory where there's a critical expertise could give you an edge in everything that you're doing when you're trying to put your whole science profile together, not just in terms of competing with other people in this proposal, but just in general, in terms of the quality of the work that you're able to be competitive in. So that sounds like a really good thing to come out of this. Let's open it up for questions. Yes, please.
I'm wondering, once you get the...
Let's use the mics, because this is recorded so someone who's not here later can go and replay you,
I'm wondering, once you get the funding, how does it get used? How would you actually perform the experiments? Are you expected to use current laboratory equipment, or do you develop a new lab, or how does that work?
Yeah, so let's open that up to the panelists. I have my opinions on it, but it'd be much more interesting to hear what's happening in reality.
For me, most of the money actually went to people. So I'm in theoretical physics, so not a lot of labs to build. My pen and paper was still paid by the division, so that was okay. So for me, it was mostly salaries. I guess for both of us, it was a little tricky because our awards were on stimulus money. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of requirements that come with stimulus money. So we had some fun writing reports. So I don't know how it is. But for me, it's essentially salary, so maybe somebody else could
Okay, but
talk
somebody
about
who had need for access, maybe, did you have maybe Susanna wants to...
So yeah, for me, I haven't started the money yet, so I'm not spending it, but in terms of the budget I put in, there was a lot of personnel in there, but I also had a lot of sequencing requests. And so for that, I put in a request for money at basically the JGI recharge rate to pay for the sequencing through the JGI, but I think in terms of the lab space and, reagents can be paid for. But I think my impression is that the lab wants to support these projects. And so I haven't needed to expand my lab yet because I haven't hired anyone yet. But the JGI is ready to give me what I need in terms of, fulfilling the obligations of the grant.
Maybe Delia could say a word about it, just because being a staff scientist at the Foundry, it's a little more complicated even in some ways, right?
It is complicated, and it continues to evolve in a complicated manner. So much of my work is happening at the Foundry, but the growth of my group has created pressures on the Foundry lab. So again, the division continues to be supportive of helping find lab space to do the work, but I do dedicate a significant amount of money from this grant to supplies, small equipment, travel, publication costs, all the usual things besides salaries that go into supporting a project. All does come from this grant, which remains separate then from Foundry money and my other grants. So it's a complicated allocation of funds and also a growingly complicated allocation of lab space.
You go in the back there, yeah.
I have actually two questions. The first question is, with all the budget discussions in Washington, how big is the chance that this program will survive? That is the first question. And the second question is, if I understood right, you don't need to have if you have a novel idea, a big track record, in the sense you don't have to have preliminary experimental results which you published already in Science or Nature to get that.
So the program will happen. So, put that out of your mind and just compete. There's some vanishingly small probability that something might happen to the program, but the benefits I would just be 100% assuming that the program is there. And I will tell you that you should just know that in 2011, in the end, that's this fiscal year, after a lot of discussions, the science budget turned out to be flat. And this project is built into that. And in the proposed budget that the House proposed a few months ago, the budget again for science was flat, which is probably one of the only 2 or 3 things in the entire budget where flat is the new up is the joke that people are making. So I think the sense of making the investment in science will still be there. And so just assume that it's there. Now, with respect to your question of track record, it would be real interesting to hear what you folks have to say about it. So do you want to say anything about track record issues? Do you think that was a defining issue in
the... I'll comment on that. So as I mentioned, I made a point of stepping well outside the sort of property application spaces I had a track record in. But I did build my proposal on a foundation of recent materials advances that I felt could be applied across into new spaces. That said, they weren't published in Nature or Science or anywhere, actually, at the time I wrote my proposal. So I made sure to include in my proposal a sufficient amount of information about this one select recent accomplishment that the reviewers could evaluate for themselves, how significant and robust the results were. They weren't counting on peer review to have judged that. So at least in my case, it wasn't apparently necessary to have a big high-profile publication as the basis for the proposed work. And as Junchao suggests, maybe that's actually not an attractive feature because it seems like, well, you already had your great result in that area. What else is new? Yeah.
Well, I have a different experience. I heard some senior people told me you always have to show why you are the best person to do this. So I got this advice is if you have Science Nature paper, you definitely want to put there. And when I wrote the proposal, I had a lot of exciting exciting ideas. But eventually, all the ideas I put in I have some preliminary results, or some of the results I did before, a published paper, or just a preliminary result I put there. I thought it's pretty helpful, and I thought the proposal I put in, I feel like everybody read it will feel like, oh wow, that's the right person to do this.
So I should revise my comment slightly, because some of my reviewers, although the work in my proposal was not anything published somewhere, some of the reviewers did comment, having looked at my CV, on specific publications that were not necessarily related in a direct way to my proposal, to say, hey, there's a track record of impactful publication, and it looks like this is a person who's going to be able to follow through and have some impact.
May I add a few comments? I think definitely your proposal has to be built on your past achievements, because in your CV, actually, in the review I received of my proposal, there is a whole paragraph commenting on my past achievements, saying that this PI has achieved a lot in a similar field and is expected to be able to do well. But in the meantime, I think what you need to propose is really something that is, I would say, because I'm a campus employee, I wrote a lot of NSF proposal. In NSF, they always emphasize on transformative. That means your proposal has to really change something. So rather than incremental change. So as I mentioned earlier, I tried last year and I didn't get it. And then immediately when I heard that bad news, I started to think about what I'm going to do for the next year competition. I started to actually not only think, but also start to do experiment in my lab. So by the time of the second competition time due, I already have a lot of preliminary data along the new direction, which I have not published, but I have already accumulated. So I put those things in as preliminary data. So yes, preliminary data is important, but doesn't have to be already published on Nature or Science. That's my comment.
So maybe I can just add something very quick, just from the view of being on the review panel. It was certainly one of the first questions you asked, is that person, how good is that person as a scientist? But I don't think it mattered whether the proposal was in that region. So you just have to essentially build, the reviewers have to trust that you can do what you propose to do. That doesn't mean that you have to have done it already, but you have to have a track record of probably having, done something interesting. That's probably, I think that's sort of what we're echoing.
That sounds right. You had a question?
There are several of us from AOS, I think. So our question is, we are a little bit special, different from the rest of lab, because our majority of our time it's actually for the user facility, because we're facility money. I'm just have a question actually. First to Paul is there anybody actually from the Synchron facility got awarded in the last 2 years? Second is, if we actually get the money, 100% of our salary got paid. That means actually we're not going to do any experiment at the beamline?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if anyone from the synchrotron community has won or not. We'll find out. Okay. So we'll have to post an answer to that, because I just don't know offhand myself. I'm not aware of it. But what I would say is that if you're at a user facility, and we encourage you very much, get in there, compete, and if you are successful, both we and the folks at DOE are going to work to find the circumstance that's going to be functional for that situation. So, Delia at the Molecular Foundry, that posed some complexities there, and there was a discussion around how to organize things so that she could continue to have her activities at the Foundry, which involve engagement with users, while starting up this project. And there was a lot of discussion about percent times and all those kinds of things. I think if you're successful as a beamline scientist, maybe the institution will have to step in to backstop your position. And if we're in a circumstance like that, we will find a way to do it. You know, I'm not exactly sure how, but I will make that commitment that if you're successful in winning one of these proposals, we will find a way to backstop your obligations so that you can you know, take the award and run with it the way you should. And that means maybe we'll have somebody else fill in, we'll bring in another postdoc. I don't know what we'll, you know, we'll have to have a discussion around the specific situation to resolve it. Yes.
Paul.
Oh. Who's going?
I've got a mic.
Over here, okay.
I have a question. Could you elaborate on the no paid collaborators rule? What classifications count as collaborators? I mean, some of the panelists mentioned that funding went for people to work with them, but does that mean students or
I think that means no PIs.
How's that different from a no co-I?
From a student or a postdoc.
Okay.
Distinct from a student or a postdoc.
Okay, all right.
That's, I think, what that means. So you can have a collaborator, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, you can have another senior scientist here or another career scientist, you know, who's collaborating with you on this, but you can't put their salary on the budget, I think, is what that means. Yes? Would that sound right? Christian, I think you encountered that, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly now have collaborators that are not at LBL and, you know, at other institutions. They're not senior science, so they're all more junior than me. I think you have senior people in your...
So, yeah, I actually did mention in my proposal where I had senior collaborators that were going to work with me to help develop some of the skills that were clearly outside of my background, but they were definitely not listed as paid collaborators, and I defined them very specifically as existing collaborators on other projects, so supported by other money, so you're making it clear that it's coming from somewhere else.
So this question is for Jun Qiao, and you mentioned you had an unsuccessful try earlier. So what are the main criticisms that defeated your first proposal?
Yeah, okay, this is a little bit more specific. My background is semiconductors. I do semiconductor research. My first try was to propose some idea that I have thought about in the past many years on semiconductor research, which I would think is a sort of projection of what I've been doing in the past years. The criticism is, one, those projects are already funded or partially funded, either by NSF in my case or by LBL programs, right? And two, the stuff you are proposing belongs to other program in DOE, not belong to this early career proposal. So actually, my first proposal, they did not really criticize that much on the science. They all agree this is a beautiful science. They just turned me down because of the facts I mentioned. So in my second try, I really went beyond what I've been doing. I talked to people. I actually went to other institutions, discussing with people new stuff that I can build upon my past research, but doing different things. My proposal, which was funded, actually is not on semiconductors anymore. It's on functional oxide.
In the very back.
Hi, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the review process. So who would be reviewing the pre-proposal and the full proposal?
I think the pre-proposals are reviewed at headquarters by the program managers. So they'll take them and, you know, fan them out to all the people in Washington who are program managers in the Department of Energy. And they're going to, that's my impression, is that they do that kind of pre-screen. And probably dominantly what they're looking for there are synergy with what's at the labs, is my guess. Because, you know, they don't want their investments to go for, you know, let's say, you know, you're at, you know, the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab and the proposal is for biofuels. You know, they're probably not going to go there. So that's an exaggerated example. But you know, that's my guess is dominantly that's what they're doing in the pre-screen. Do you have a feel for how many made it to this? Do you know how many made it to the second stage? They all did. So there you go. Tough filter there.
I believe
you know,
what I was what I was told when I was on the panel, that essentially they only screen for technical problems. So if you apply to the wrong agency or you were more than 10 years out, essentially I think at least that was last year. The pre-screen was a technical screen, as far as I know.
Yeah. Okay, procedural stuff.
Correct.
You mean?
Paul?
Yeah. Right. Sorry, I had that wrong. Okay.
Paul, I think that internally this year we're being asked to do some of the screen before the pre-proposals go in, for the divisions to make sure that they fit within the science and to make sure that the scientists are eligible by all of those rules. So we're trying to do it a little bit more at the lab site.
I think there was also a question on just the review panel, and I actually served on the review panel 2 years ago, and it was just the same, group of outside experts, the same as any NIH review panel or NSF. They did all meet in a room and discuss all the proposals, and I imagine it seemed like since it was the first year, it seemed like they were probably going to keep tweaking the process. But one thing I was a little surprised by is that actually all the DOE lab people were sent out of the room when the DOE lab proposals were reviewed, regardless of whether they were LBL or Oak Ridge or whatever. And so your reviewers would be academic reviewers, not DOE lab people. So it's worth thinking about that. That's the audience, that they wouldn't necessarily know that much about the DOE.
I would also like to add that although the pre-screening is completely technical, but you cannot change it, meaning that once you propose this title with this abstract in the pre-proposal, like 2 months later you want to propose a different title, even a slight difference in the title would disqualify you.
Yes.
Paul, so a question to you. In your talk, you outlined your vision for the lab in 2020 with concentration on some particular areas. Is this vision communicated to the agencies and the selection panels? Does the laboratory management provide some ranking or some preference among the proposals? How does what you communicated feed into this process, and what's the interplay?
Yeah, in the first year of this, they asked the laboratories, but did not mandate that we do any filtering. They said it's up to each lab how you want to do the filtering. And I can say on my end, as lab director, for example, I really didn't want to filter them because I feel like you should have a chance to propose your idea and see what happens. And so there essentially was no filtering in that first year. And I think it's very hard to do that kind of filtering. You let now in terms of the question is, how much do people know about the laboratory vision? Well, the DOE folks definitely know. Many of the slides that you saw here, at a minimum once a year, I will go and give our annual lab plan extended presentation just to give you guys a sense of what happens. I'll go and I speak for 2 hours in front of a large group of people, about 50 people from the Department of Energy that hear what is the lab thinking about for the next 10, 15 years. And then there's just so you know, then there's a gap of about an hour when we go. Jim will be there with me and others from the lab, senior management. We go off someplace into a corner and have, drink some orange juice and then come back and they give us their comments. We hear a lot of comments from them. So that's an annual lab review process. So many of the people in the end that will make, I think, the final determinations know what the overall lab strategy is and also know in specific divisions what are the programs and things like that. And I believe they have a very good sense of that. So they're going to get the input from the review panels, but they're also going to have somebody at the end who's in the position to make the final call. Might be looking at 10 incredibly worthy proposals that came up to the top, and we'll decide to fund 5 at different laboratories on the basis of how they couple in with what they believe are the investments that they want to make in particular areas. I doubt, as you indicated, that the technical review panel is going to be aware of those things, but that's almost a separate component in it.
So there was a little bit of discussion about the review process. So I had 2 questions related to that. One was, what did you see as criteria that were different from any other DOE proposal for the early career program? And the second question related to that was, were things like letters of support considered, which might be in terms of other senior collaborators who say, oh, they are going to devote some of their time, or facilities in the lab, were they an important criteria in the review process?
Letters of support are not allowed.
Okay, they're not.
Yeah.
So when you say it in the microphone.
No letters of support are allowed.
So maybe I can take a stab. I mean, for me, it looked like any other review. I mean, we were a group, when we reviewed last year, we were a group of, I don't know, 20 people from all the top institutions. And I believe what they also did is they sent out for more letters. So in the end, you had on every proposal, there were like, what I was reviewing, like 70 maybe. There were like 5 letters or something coming from either the panel or from outside people. And then, you just go through. You spend a lot of time going through the proposals to some degree. So I think there's some ranking that they do, and then they sort of try to rank it according to that. That's how they did it there. And then you sort of go from the top down, and then you ask, okay, so anybody who ended up at the bottom who should be moved. I mean, it's a pretty, thorough process, but on that level, I think what Paul said is right. You go by the scientific merit, and we never once thought about which lab or university is that person at.
I mean, I think I might comment that I think that it probably is a case where there's maybe a little more weight put on the person, just because it's really hard to propose 5 years worth of research, and so they kind of have to take it, a certain amount on faith that you're going to figure out what you want to do, 3 or 4 years down the road. And I think my impression also was, at least when I evaluated these, that there just wasn't enough space for a lot of technical details that you might put in a grant, and the proposals that I reviewed that really started getting into minute technical details, it seemed like they were really wasting their space, that was very limited, and they really needed to give a vision. So I think that, really it is the same strengths in any grant, but I think particularly you need to have sort of a long-term vision that you can't articulate really in every single detail.
Thank you. I will say something on that front, just because it triggers a thought. As we end up in a situation where the funding gets tight, then all the kind of margin gets squeezed out of the system, and everybody becomes super, super conservative, right? The review, if you NIH you're proposing or something, there's so little growth, and there's so many people proposing that everybody becomes unbelievably conservative, and they want to see that everything's been proven and that everything, essentially the proposal's already been done, and yet it has to open up a complete new future. And, the system just feels sometimes like it's really not working very well. Here's a little ray of light in that system where, they're saying basically, you don't have to have dotted every I and crossed every T. You have to lay out a vision for the future, and you have to have a track record. And to me, those are sort of almost the ideal criteria to use for funding something or not. So I think it's very exciting that this project even, that this avenue even exists because of that reason. It's sort of really based on what should be the most important ways to decide. I wish that was done in all the grants at all the different levels. And it's unfortunate that sometimes it's not. And I will just say one thing on that. When you are reviewing proposals, because each of you will review proposals, probably you do all the time now, remember that and think about it a little bit. Really what you're trying to look for, even no matter what they tell you, in the end the 2 things that you want to look at when you're reviewing a proposal is the quality of the person. Are they able to execute this kind of thing? And and whether there's a neat idea there. And getting into trying to triple and quadruple guess whether this person has done X, Y, or Z control and so on tends to be very self-defeating. And yet the science community often does that to itself. So just bear that in mind when you're reviewing other proposals. That you should do that. Yes, Sally's going to correct you.
Yeah, I want to clarify what I said. Letters of collaboration should state the intention to participate, but they should not be written as recommendation or endorsement letters, which are not allowed.
Okay. Got time for one more. Did we exhaust the questions? Yeah? One more.
Do you have some examples of good proposals that was successful that we can have a look?
I don't know. We'll talk about that, and if we do, we'll post them, okay? Yeah.
So I have one more question. So I remember last year, one of our colleagues got the feedback back, and I think there's 5 or 6 reviewers. 5 of them says strongly recommended. 1 says encourage this. I'm just wondering whether you get all of them strongly encourage.
What does it take? Does it have to be a complete unanimity on it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a scale of 1 to 6, and my impression was that you needed to have 5s or 6s on the scale of 1 to 6 to be successful.
Yeah,
I would think across the board. I mean, I think the scale, like the 3 and 4 was kind of encouraged, but when I was on the panel, 3 or 4 was pretty much like, encouraged. Yeah, like this isn't bad, but it's not really something we're seriously considering.
So I think he got to 5, 6, 1, 5. So, but
then that must have gotten, I mean, either it was an incredibly competitive panel or else it was, something that the DOE didn't like, would be my impression.
Of the 80 that we reviewed, there were at least
know.
10 that had 6s and 5s. So.
And how many got funded? I mean, I think that's the point is.
4 maybe?
Right. So you see, that's I think the point is you can make it all the way to that stage, and unfortunately then there's this last stage, because even then there's still more than they can actually do. There's going to be some judgment applied by the folks in DOE at the end about which ones they want to support, and so that's tough, but it's how it is. There's just not enough money.
That's why I'm suspicious whether DLS would ever.
Prove them wrong. Go and do it. Okay, you can be the one that breaks through. Good luck.